The sun sat heavy over the fields that morning, pressing down on every back bent toward the endless rows of cotton. Heat shimmered in the air, thick enough to feel like punishment. Sweat rolled down skin faster than hands could wipe it away. Among the workers was Aliyah, 21 years old, her palms raw, her arms trembling from hours of labor. She had long grown used to the burn of the sun, but some days, like this one, it felt unforgiving, almost personal. Her breaths came shallow and her vision wavered from exhaustion. That was when she noticed him. A few rows over, moving through the cotton with slow, heavy steps, was Josiah, 23, tall and broad-shouldered, his skin glistening with sweat. His movements were steady but strained, like every motion carried the weight of chains even when none were visible. He didn't speak. He didn't look around. But there was something in the way he carried himself, something quiet, wounded, and unbroken, that drew her eyes like a magnet. Aliyah watched him for a moment longer than she meant to. His face was tense, jaw tight, but his eyes held a softness, a buried tenderness that didn't belong in a place like this. He felt her gaze. He lifted his head, and for the briefest second, their eyes met. The moment was quick, almost accidental, but it lingered. Well, not in the air, but in the space between their hearts. In that glance, Aliyah saw it clearly. The shared pain, the silent endurance, and the fragile hope tucked deep behind his tired stare. Josiah looked away quickly, forced back into the motions of the day as the overseer's shadow stretched dangerously close. But he didn't forget the moment. He couldn't. Something in Aliyah's eyes mirrored the exhaustion inside him, and something else he hadn't felt in a long time. Recognition. Hours later, when the sun finally loosened its grip on the land and the workers lined up for water, Aliyah reached the barrel first. Her hands trembled as she cupped the cool water, lifting it to her lips to soothe the dryness in her throat. She didn't hear Josiah approach. She only felt the shift in the air beside her. He stood a step away, chest rising and falling with the last threads of daylight clinging to his skin. He hesitated, careful not to startle her, then gently nudged the barrel forward. "You drink first," he said softly. It wasn't just courtesy. It was kindness. Fun a small act, but one that meant everything in a world where kindness was a luxury none could afford. Aliyah looked up at him, startled by the sincerity in his gesture. He didn't turn away this time. His eyes stayed on her. Warm, uncertain, almost protective. "I'm Josiah," he murmured. She nodded. "Aliyah." The sun dipped behind the trees, leaving them bathed in dusky gold. And for the first time that day, the fields felt quiet, peaceful even. They didn't speak again. They didn't need to. The silence between them was full of questions, of unspoken understanding, of something fragile and new forming in the spaces their words didn't reach. And though neither of them realized it then, that small exchange by the water barrel, that gentle look between two broken souls, it was the beginning of a love that would fight against time, distance, suffering, and fate itself. A spark born from silence. A connection woven from shared pain. A story just beginning. The nights on the plantation were never truly dark. Moonlight always found a way to slip through cracks, illuminating the places where secrets lived. And it was in those shadows that Aliyah and Josiah's bond slowly took root. Aliyah moved quietly through the dim barn, her tired eyes scanning for the familiar silhouette she had grown to crave. Josiah often finished his tasks late, slipping away from the overseer's sight just long enough to find her. The barn became their refuge, where danger lurked outside, but something tender waited inside. He would appear from behind stacked hay, his breath warm from running, his chest rising and falling beneath his torn, sweat-soaked shirt. She always greeted him with that soft, weary smile that somehow made him forget the chains on their wrists during the day. They talked in whispers, voices barely above the hum of the night insects, words too precious to risk being overheard. Alia shared half of her cornbread. Josiah brought her a stolen piece of dried meat. In a place where nothing belonged to them, not their time, not their bodies, not even their futures, sharing food felt like sharing life. Sometimes Josiah would pull her into the darkest corner when he heard footsteps approaching. He'd stand in front of her, shielding her with his body, eyes alert and fierce. He had already taken a whipping in her place once, and he never wanted her to experience that again. They were two hearts bruised by the same world, learning to beat in harmony. And in those stolen minutes, leaning against old wooden beams, they allowed themselves to dream. Dream of running. Dream of breathing without fear. Dream of a place where their hands could stay intertwined in daylight. One night, as their fingers brushed in the shadows, Josiah whispered the vow that became the pulse of their love. If we run together. Aaliyah looked up at him, eyes glistening. Together, she promised, soft, firm, unbreakable. And so, in a world designed to crush them, they built a love powerful enough to imagine escape. Rumors on the plantation often traveled faster than the overseer's whips. A single whisper, carried by trembling lips, could spread like a storm gust through the fields. And this time, the wind brought news that made every worker's spine stiffen. Alia first heard it while bending over a row of cotton plants. Two older women nearby spoke in hushed tones, glancing around nervously. "He's drowning in debt," one murmured. "They say he might sell the land and us with it." Alia's hands stilled, her heart hammered against her ribs. Being sold meant losing everything, including Josiah. Across the rows, Josiah noticed the panic flicker in her eyes. He straightened, wiped sweat from his brow, and waited for the overseer to pass before moving closer. When their paths crossed, he whispered out the side of his mouth, "You heard it too?" She nodded, throat tight. The fields felt different after that, like the soil itself sensed the coming upheaval. Workers exchanged fearful glances. Whispers followed them everywhere. Every sundown became heavier, every sunrise sharper, because no one knew which day would be the last on familiar ground. That night, inside their shadowed corner of the barn, Aaliyah leaned into Josiah's chest, listening to his heartbeat thrum like a war drum beneath his worn shirt. He ran a steady hand down her back, though she could feel the tension in his muscles. "If he sells us," she said softly, "we'll be torn apart." Josiah cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "No," he said with quiet certainty. "I won't let that happen. Even if time is running out, we'll find a way before they take it from us." She rested her forehead against his, drawing strength from the warmth of his skin, from the unshaken determination in his eyes. The danger only deepened their connection. Every stolen moment in the shadows felt more urgent, their hands gripping more tightly. Their love grew not in safety, but in the edge of approaching loss. That night, as the wind hissed through the loose boards of the barn, it carried both dread and a promise of change. Aaliyah and Josiah knew their world was shifting, and whatever was coming would force them to make a choice: run for freedom, or risk being torn apart forever. The morning the announcement came, the air felt unusually still, thick, unmoving, like the sky itself was holding its breath. Workers gathered in the yard because the overseer's bell had rung 3 times, a signal no one ever ignored. Fear spread across the crowd like a silent wave. Aaliyah stood near the back, her hands trembling against her skirt. Josiah positioned himself close enough to reach her if she faltered. Neither spoke. The plantation owner stepped onto the porch, a folded paper in his hand. Even before he read it, people sensed the truth. Mothers clutched their children, husbands pressed against their wives, elders whispered prayers. And then came the words that shattered the yard. In 2 weeks there will be an auction. All property, land, tools, livestock, and workers will be sold. A cry burst from somewhere in the crowd. Another followed. Someone dropped to their knees. A baby wailed. The sound became a storm of fear and grief. Couples held each other like the ground beneath them had turned to water. Families clung tightly, desperate and shaking. No one knew who would be sold, or where, or with whom. Aaliyah felt her breath leave her body. Her chest tightened until she thought she might collapse, but then Josiah's hand slid into hers, steady, firm. She gripped back with everything she had. The owner dismissed the crowd with a sharp wave and returned inside, as though he hadn't just torn dozens of lives apart. People scattered slowly, their eyes empty. Some went to the fields because they had no choice. Others sat on the ground, rocking, whispering goodbyes too early, too painfully. Aaliyah and Josiah slipped away to the barn, their sanctuary of shadows. Inside, away from the eyes of overseers, Aaliyah broke. Tears streamed down her face as she tried to speak, but her voice cracked. Josiah, 2 weeks. They're going to separate us. Josiah pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could feel his heartbeat pounding against her cheek. Not if we leave first, he whispered fiercely. We won't stay for that auction. We won't give them the chance. She looked up, fear shimmering in her eyes. You mean run? Run, he confirmed. His voice didn't shake, not once. Aaliyah swallowed, imagining the dogs, the cold nights, the dangers lurking beyond plantation lines, but the thought of losing him, of never seeing his face again, was a fear far greater. She nodded. Then we run together. And in that dim, dusty barn, with the world closing in on them, 2 enslaved hearts made the most dangerous promise of their lives. Freedom or nothing. Together or not at all. Night on the plantation was never truly dark. Lanterns swung on porches, overseers patrolled with rifles, dogs slept lightly, their ears sharp even in dreams. But for Aaliyah and Josiah, the night became something sacred, the only time they could breathe, think, plan. It began 3 nights after the auction announcement. Under the old oak tree at the edge of the quarters, its roots thick, its branches spread like a shield, they met in silence. The moonlight washed their faces pale, but their eyes burned with the same fire. Josiah arrived first, carrying a small burlap sack. Aaliyah followed moments later with one of her own. She sat beside him, their shoulders touching, and exhaled a shaky breath. Is anyone watching? She whispered. Josiah scanned the shadows like he always did. No, not tonight. They opened their sacks, inside hers. Scraps of cornbread, a handful of dried berries she had traded for with an older woman, 2 pieces of smoked meat she'd saved by pretending she wasn't hungry. Inside his, A stolen flint rock for starting fire. A worn map corner he'd taken from the edge of an overseer's supply list. A tiny metal nail, bent, but sharp enough to be useful. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Every night they added more. They learned the guards' patterns, not just when they patrolled, but how they walked. Which overseer dragged his feet, which one hummed under his breath, which one paused to drink from a flask near the stables. These small details became lifelines. Josiah used his strength during the day to memorize the terrain, dips in the fences, loose posts, places where the dogs were chained further away. Aaliyah used her sharp eyes to watch the kitchen routes, which door was sometimes left unbolted, which window didn't creak when opened slowly. Together, they pieced a path toward freedom like two hands weaving a single thread. Each night under that oak tree, hope grew and fear grew with it. Some nights, Aaliyah trembled. What if we get caught? Josiah always took her hand. Then we try again until we make it. Other nights he doubted. What if we don't make it far enough? Aaliyah would lift his chin gently. Then at least we tried together. By the end of the first week, their plan had shape. By the end of the second, it had purpose. On their final night under the oak, the moon was full and bright, casting their shadows long across the grass. They stood facing each other, breathing the same breath, sharing the same fear and the same unstoppable desire. Aaliyah rested her forehead against his, her voice barely more than a tremor. Josiah, if you go, I go. His hand cupped her cheek, tender and firm. And where you go, I go. The promise settled between them like sacred truth, fragile yet unbreakable. Freedom was dangerous, staying was death, but together they still had a chance. And so, under the whispering branches, with nothing but hope and each other, Aaliyah and Josiah sealed a silent pact. In the darkness, they would choose the light. In chains, they would choose freedom. And in fear, they would choose each other. The night they chose to run carried an eerie stillness, as if the land itself knew something sacred and dangerous was about to happen. Aaliyah wore a faded brown dress and a dark headscarf to blend into the shadows. Her hands shook not from cold, but from the weight of everything she was risking. Josiah, muscles tense beneath his torn work shirt and rough trousers, stood beside her at the edge of the quarters. The moon cast a silver glow across the fields, painting their fear in quiet light. Their surroundings felt alive, crickets whispering, wind brushing through tall grass, the distant creak of the manor house settling in its sleep. For the first time in weeks, the guards seemed distracted. The path near the barn was empty. The dogs were quiet. It was time. Josiah squeezed Aaliyah's hand. You ready? He asked, voice low but steady. She nodded, though her heart hammered so loudly she wondered if he could hear it. Yes, tonight, we run. They moved fast but silent, staying low, navigating the shadows behind the smokehouse, then toward the old fence they had mapped over countless nights. Aaliyah's breathing trembled, but she matched Josiah's steps exactly. The moon guided them through open patches and hid them under clouds. For a moment, just one fleeting, fragile moment, it felt like freedom might actually be real. They slipped under the broken fence post. They made it across the first field. They reached the tree line bordering the woods. Aaliyah's eyes filled with tears of hope. They were doing it. Josiah whispered, breathless, just a little further, Aaliyah. Stay close. But then a bark, sharply cut, followed by another. And another. Aaliyah froze. No, no, no. Torches flared behind them like angry stars bursting through the night. Shouts ripped through the fields. "They're running! Bring the dogs!" Josiah grabbed her hand. "Run!" And they ran, through bushes that scratched their arms, across roots that nearly sent them falling, through the heavy darkness of the forest. Their breaths were ragged, their lungs burning. Josiah pulled Aaliyah forward, refusing to let her slip. She clung to his hand like it was the last piece of life she owned. The dogs' snarls echoed behind them. Torches flickered through the trees, casting monstrous shadows. "Josiah," Aaliyah gasped, her legs weakening. "I'm right here," he shouted back. But then a shot. Explosive, cruel, shattering the night. Aaliyah screamed. Josiah stumbled but didn't fall. He tightened his grip, forcing her onward. "Keep going." Another shot fired. Torches drew closer. Josiah looked over his shoulder, saw the approaching line of men and made a split-second choice, a choice that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He pushed Aaliyah forward. "Run ahead! I'll catch up." "No, Josiah!" She reached for him. But a branch snapped to their left, another group closing in. Chaos swallowed them. A final shot exploded. The forest erupted in barking and shouting. Aaliyah felt her hand ripped away from his. Darkness swallowed them both. She fell hard, rolling down a hill into thick brush. The world blurred. Pain shot through her arms and knees. She scrambled up, breathless, desperate, but Josiah was gone. His voice, his steps, his hand, all gone. "Aaliyah!" he shouted once, somewhere far too far. She screamed his name back. "Josiah!" Only echo answered her. Torches rushed in his direction. The night tore them apart. And in the crushing silence that followed, Aaliyah realized the truth. They had run together, but only one of them might make it out alive. The forest swallowed Josiah whole, each frantic step pushing him deeper into the darkness until the voices behind him blurred into a single, distant roar. Branches whipped his face, roots tore at his feet, and the world spun in flashes of silver moonlight and black fear. But he ran, and somehow, by a miracle or fate, he reached the river. The water rushed fast and cold under the moon, whispering freedom. Josiah didn't hesitate. He plunged in, the shock stealing his breath. The current dragged him under, spun him, fought him, but he broke the surface again, kicking with everything he had left. On the shore behind him, dogs barked furiously. Men shouted. Torches flared like angry suns. But he was out of range, out of sight, out of reach. He had made it out. Josiah's chest heaved as he clung to a fallen tree near the water's edge, half drowning, half praying. He should have felt relief. He should have felt victory. But he didn't, because Aaliyah wasn't with him. Aaliyah didn't reach the river. She didn't even reach the base of the hill she'd tumbled down. Rough hands seized her, 2, then 4, yanking her up, dragging her back through the trees. Her legs flailed. She fought until they struck her across the face. The blow cracked stars behind her eyes. The earth tilted. Her breath caught. They beat her until she stopped resisting. They bound her wrists so tight her hands went numb. And then they marched her back towards the plantation, her bare feet stumbling over rocks and roots, each step a slice of pain. By the time she reached the yard, dawn was creeping up the sky. Aaliyah's dress was torn, her cheeks swollen, her lips split. Blood streaked her arms. She collapsed the moment they shoved her into the dirt. Workers gathered in silence. Some cried quietly. Others looked away, their hearts breaking but their bodies too afraid to move. The overseer spat at the ground near her face. Make sure she's ready. She goes first at the auction. Aaliyah's breath hitched, her body trembling. First to be sold, first to be taken away, first to lose everything, including Josiah. From the cover of thick brush at the far end of the woods, Josiah watched through tears that blurred the entire world. He had come back, risked everything, crawling through mud and thorns until he reached a hidden place near the slave quarters, where he could see the yard without being seen. He saw them drag Aaliyah in. He saw her fall. He saw her try to lift her head only to collapse again. And something inside him shattered so violently it felt like his ribs were cracking open. His hands gripped the earth. His breath broke. His heart screamed. But he couldn't move. He couldn't go to her. If he did, they would shoot him on sight. From his hiding place, Josiah pressed his forehead against a tree trunk, choking on a sob. He had promised her they would run together. Instead, she was going to be sold away. While he watched from the shadows, powerless and bleeding inside. The guilt was a pain deeper than any wound. He whispered her name, broken and quiet. Aaliyah. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But the wind carried his apology away, leaving him alone with the crushing truth. Only one of them had made it out, and it wasn't the one who deserved it most. Morning rose slow and heavy, like the sky itself dreaded what was coming. The air smelled of dust, sweat, and sorrow, the kind that settled into the bones long before a single word was spoken. Aaliyah stood barefoot on the wooden platform, hands trembling though she forced them to stay at her sides. The bruises across her cheek had darkened overnight, but the real hurt lived deeper, hidden behind her eyes. The auction yard buzzed with voices, murmurs, the creak of wagon wheels, the clink of coins. Aaliyah felt every sound like a blow. She felt exposed, humiliated, stripped of everything except her heartbeat, and even that felt like it belonged to someone else now. Men looked at her as if she were nothing more than an object carved from wood. They inspected her height, her muscles, her skin. One whispered, "She'll fetch high," as if she couldn't hear him. But she wasn't thinking about them. She was thinking about him. Josiah. She couldn't see him, but she felt him, somewhere in the trees, in the shadows, watching. Her heart tugged toward the woods like a compass pointing home. The auctioneer climbed the platform. "Next up, Aaliyah," the crowd murmured. The sound made her stomach twist. Her vision blurred for a second, not from tears, but from swallowing too many of them. She tried to stand tall even as her knees shook. She reminded herself of who she was, of the girl who used to laugh quietly with Josiah behind the barn, of the dreamer who traced constellations in the night sky and whispered that freedom had to be real. But now that dream felt like a fragile glass that had already shattered. Hidden behind thick hedges beyond the yard, Josiah, eyes red and swollen, breath frozen in his chest, watched her step onto the platform. His hands clutched the earth so tightly the soil dug into his palms. "Aaliyah," he whispered, his voice barely breath. She looked small from where he hid. Small, wounded, but still standing, still glowing with that quiet strength he had fallen in love with the first moment he saw her, bent over rows of cotton beneath the sun. And he knew he had failed her. "Do I hear 200? The auctioneer shouted. Hands shot up instantly. 220, 240, 260. Aaliyah's head spun. She gripped the edge of the platform, nails digging into splintered wood to ground herself. The crowd blurred. The voices grew far away. Everything funneled into one crushing truth. She was being sold, ripped away. She scanned the trees, searching, hoping, and then she saw it. A flicker, a shadow. A pair of eyes locked on hers through the branches. Josiah. Her breath stilled. He reached one hand out toward her from the darkness, fingers trembling, stretching as far as they could. Aaliyah's chest broke open with a sob she couldn't release. She lifted her own hand slowly, shakily toward him. Two hands, two souls, two promises, reaching, reaching. But the distance was too great. Their fingertips touched nothing but air. Sold, $310 to the Ravenford plantation. A man stepped forward with a thick coat, cold eyes, and a smirk that made Aaliyah's skin crawl. He grabbed her arm roughly. "Get her to the wagon." She stumbled as he dragged her from the platform. She twisted her head back one last time, desperate, desperate to see Josiah again. Through thick branches and shifting sunlight, she saw him. He wasn't crying. He wasn't shaking. He was burning. His expression was pure devastation wrapped in fierce, unbreakable determination. As the wagon driver shoved her in, Josiah mouthed 4 words, slow, clear, sacred. "I will find you." Aaliyah felt her heart crack, not from hopelessness, but from believing him. She pressed her palm against the wagon's wooden bars. Josiah pressed his against the air between them. The wagon lurched forward. The distance grew. The trees closed. Josiah fell out of sight. But she held on to his promise like a lifeline. No matter how many miles lay between them, no matter how many chains, Josiah would come. He had vowed it with his soul. "I will find you, no matter how long it takes." The day Aaliyah was taken away, something inside Josiah broke, but something else ignited. A fire, a vow, a purpose big enough to outlive pain. The woods became his first shelter, the river his first road. With no map, no money, no name he could safely speak, Josiah stepped into a world he had only ever imagined from behind fences. And he searched. In his early 20s, Josiah moved through small towns and muddy crossroads, carrying only what he could hold in his hands and what he refused to let go of in his heart. He approached plantations from a distance, hiding in brush, risking death each time, just to ask a single question. Did a woman named Aaliyah come through here? Most times he was chased away. Sometimes he was ignored. Once a man laughed in his face and said, "Boy, you think I keep track of names." But Josiah kept walking, kept searching, kept breathing only because he promised her he would. Months passed, then years. And his hope never died. It just changed shape. It became quieter, sharper, more stubborn than fear. At night he slept under trees, clutching a small carved wooden star he'd made for her long ago, the one she never got to hold. When the wind rustled the leaves, Josiah imagined her voice in it. "Josiah, don't give up." He never did. Meanwhile, far from him, Aaliyah lived through days that scraped pieces from her soul. The Ravenford plantation was colder, harsher, and more unforgiving than anything she had known. Overseers treated every breath she took as something they owned. Work began before sunrise and ended when the stars blurred in exhaustion. But Aaliyah survived because she remembered him. She remembered his whisper against her ear under the barn's shadows. She remembered his hand covering hers when their worlds were still whole. She remembered the last thing he mouthed as she was dragged away. "I will find you." On nights when her body ached so deeply she thought she might split apart, she lay beneath the wooden beams of the slave quarters and repeated the words like a prayer carved into her spirit. "He's coming. He's coming for me. Josiah is coming." Sometimes she cried softly into her blanket. Sometimes she smiled through the tears. Every day the world tried to kill hope inside her. Every day she planted another seed of it instead. By his late 20s, Josiah had traveled through counties, states, backwoods roads, and abandoned fields. He learned to survive on scraps, to hide from patrols, to read the forest like a map. And then, one night near a tavern, he overheard something. A worker mentioned a woman with sad eyes and a scar on her cheek, sold to a plantation miles south. Aaliyah had a scar, a small one, near her left eye. Josiah froze, breathless. The man continued, "Owner says she never talks, works hard, keeps her head down. They call her Quiet Woman. Aaliyah. It had to be her." Josiah left before dawn and walked until his feet bled through his shoes. But when he reached the plantation, he learned a wagon had taken her away 3 days earlier. He missed her by 3 days. The news knifed through him, but he didn't collapse. He didn't scream. He didn't lose faith. He simply lowered his head, steadied his breath, and whispered, "I'll find you. I swear it." And he walked again. Years hardened Aaliyah in places, but kept her soft in others. Her body grew stronger, though the work broke her spirit again and again. Yet through every season, spring heat, autumn storms, winter frost, she held on to Josiah's memory like a rope pulling her through the dark. When loneliness felt like a second skin, she would hum the song Josiah once sang under the mango tree back home. Soft and trembling notes only she could hear. It kept her alive. Time carved lines around Josiah's eyes. His hair grew longer, coarser. His shoulders broadened, but the fire in him never dimmed. If anything, it burned hotter. He became known in whispers. A shadow, a rumor. A ghost who moved plantation to plantation asking the same question. "Have you seen her?" Some said they had. Some lied. Some didn't answer at all. But one thing never changed. Josiah never stopped chasing what the world tried to take from him. A love stretched across time. 2 lives. 2 roads. Running parallel. Reaching, searching, never touching. Yet still connected by something stronger than chains, stronger than years, stronger than the cruelty of the world. Faith, love, promise. Aaliyah survived because she believed Josiah was out there searching. Josiah survived because he believed Aaliyah was out there waiting. And neither of them ever lost hope that one day after storms, after suffering, after endless miles, their paths would cross again. Dusk settled gently over the outskirts of the old plantation as Josiah, now 27, approached its weather-beaten gate. His brown shirt faded from sun and struggle, his boots coated in river mud, and his face carved with years of searching. He looked like a man held together by one last thread of hope. His expression flickered between fear and desperate longing as he scanned the land that had the woman he loved. The surrounding fields stretched wide, painted in the dying amber light of sunset. Voices drifted from distant cabins, tired, worn, hollow. Nothing about the place felt alive. Not anymore. Josiah's breath trembled in his chest. He whispered, barely audible, "Aaliyah, please be here." An older woman, Martha, 52, Dressed in a simple grey work dress and head wrap, her face lined by exhaustion and grief, watched him from the yard. She recognized the look in his eyes. She had seen Aaliyah wear that same longing every evening. Slowly she walked toward him, her steps dragging in the dry earth. "You look like a man who's been searching," she said gently. Josiah swallowed hard. "I'm looking for Alia. She was brought here months ago, light smile. Quiet voice." His voice cracked. "She's my—" "You the man she kept whispering about?" Josiah freezes. His heart jumps. He nods. Martha looks away, tears gathering. Then the words fall slow, heavy, and fatal. "She gone, child? Weeks now." Josiah froze where he stood. The sky dimmed behind him, the orange light collapsing into purple shadows. His lips parted, but no sound came out. His eyes shimmered with disbelief, then pain, then a grief so deep it hollowed his chest. His knees buckled, and he steadied himself against the wooden fence, breathing in short, scattered bursts. Martha touched his arm gently. She had a place. She sat there every evening, always looking out the road. She nodded. "Come, I'll show you." Josiah followed, his steps heavy, the world spinning as though refusing to steady itself under the weight of heartbreak. They stopped at a large oak tree, its branches stretching wide like tired arms. The ground beneath was soft from the many hours Aaliyah had sat there. A small patch of earth looked recently disturbed. A few wilting wildflowers lay against the trunk. Josiah's breathing grew uneven. Beneath a smooth stone at the tree's roots lay a folded piece of paper, the edges weathered, the center smudged with fingerprints. "She held it every day," Martha said softly. "Said it was for you." Josiah dropped to his knees. Hands shaking, he lifted the paper. The letter trembled in his fingers. As he unfolded it, the fading light caught the soft strokes of her handwriting, uneven, exhausted, but full of love. He read, "My Josiah, if your feet ever touch this place, know I waited. I waited every sunrise, every sunset. My body is tired, but my love stayed strong. If you made it to freedom, then a part of me did too. Forgive me for not holding on longer." A breath left him, a broken, aching sound. Tears streamed freely down his face, dripping onto her letter, blurring the ink like the sky was crying with him. Josiah pressed the letter to his chest. He lowered his forehead to the tree trunk, the same spot where she had rested her head for countless evenings. His voice was a whisper torn in half. "Alia, I found you, but not in time." The night closed in around him, fireflies flickering gently, the wind rustling the leaves as though carrying her voice into the darkness. And under that tree, the place where she had waited for him until her last breath, Josiah wept the reunion he never got to have.